Ryan, please don't leave me.
You should have walked away the moment you found out who I really am.
If you leave me, I swear I'm gonna kill myself.
You should go and don't come back. I don't want to see you again.
From the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, Ryan Harrison could see nearly the entire city. The view was breathtaking. Most people would have given anything to stand where he stood. But Ryan barely noticed it. His attention remained fixed on the engagement ring resting in a small black box on his desk. A smile slowly appeared on his face. Tonight was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of his life. After 3 years together, he had finally decided to propose to Victoria Stone. Everything had been carefully planned. The restaurant had been reserved. The musicians had been hired. The ring had cost more than most people earned in 10 years. For once, Ryan felt hopeful. For once, he allowed himself to believe that maybe he had finally found someone who loved him. His phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. "I'm running a little late. Meet me at the restaurant in an hour." Ryan smiled. "No problem," he replied. He closed the ring box and slipped it into his jacket pocket. An hour later, Ryan arrived at the luxury restaurant. The manager greeted him immediately. "Good evening, Mr. Harrison." Ryan nodded politely. "Good evening." The manager escorted him toward the private dining room. As Ryan approached, he noticed Victoria's voice coming from inside. She wasn't alone. Apparently one of her friends had arrived before he did. Ryan was about to enter when he heard his own name. He stopped. "I don't know why you're waiting so long," Victoria's friend said. Ryan frowned slightly. Then Victoria laughed. The sound sent a strange feeling through his chest. "What do you mean?" Victoria asked. "You know exactly what I mean. Ryan is obsessed with you." Victoria laughed again. Ryan remained still. Then he heard words he would never forget. "I don't love Ryan." The world seemed to stop. His heart pounded. For a moment he wondered if he had heard wrong. Then Victoria continued. "I love the life Ryan gives me." Silence. Ryan couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Inside the room, Victoria continued speaking casually. "Do you know what it's like dating a billionaire?" Her friend laughed. Victoria's voice became excited. "The private jets, the luxury vacations, the gifts, the parties." Ryan felt sick. Every word felt like a knife. "But do you actually love him?" her friend asked. Victoria paused. Then came the answer. "Love has nothing to do with it." Ryan closed his eyes. The engagement ring suddenly felt heavier than stone. For 3 years he had trusted her. For 3 years he had believed she cared about him. Now he realized she cared only about what he could provide. A few minutes later, Ryan quietly left the restaurant without entering the room. He never answered Victoria's calls that night. Or the next day. Or the day after that. 2 weeks later, the relationship ended. But things became even worse. One afternoon Ryan saw a photograph online. Victoria standing beside another man. Jason Cole. A wealthy real estate investor. The headline spread quickly across social media. Victoria Stone moves on with billionaire investor Jason Cole. Ryan stared at the article. Then he noticed a quote. According to anonymous sources, Jason's fortune was significantly larger than Ryan's. Ryan let out a bitter laugh. That was all the confirmation he needed. She hadn't chosen another man. She had chosen more money. That realization broke something inside him. Weeks passed. Ryan buried himself in work. Meetings. Investments. Business trips. Interviews. Yet nothing helped. The loneliness followed him everywhere. One evening he sat alone inside his penthouse. The city lights sparkled outside. But for the first time in years, the luxury apartment felt empty. His phone rang. Daniel Brooks. His best friend. Ryan answered. "Hey." Daniel immediately noticed something was wrong. "You sound terrible." "I feel terrible." Daniel sighed. "You still thinking about Victoria?" Ryan leaned back. "It's not Victoria." "Then what is it?" Ryan stared at the city. "It's everyone." Daniel remained silent. Ryan continued. "How do I know who actually cares about me?" "What do you mean?" "If I lost everything tomorrow, who would stay?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because he didn't have an answer. Ryan laughed bitterly. Exactly. The silence between them said everything. That night Ryan barely slept. For hours he stared at the ceiling. Thinking. Questioning. Wondering. By sunrise, he had made a decision. A decision that would change his life forever. The next morning, Ryan walked into Daniel's office. Daniel looked up from his desk. "You look like a man about to do something crazy." Ryan sat down. "I probably am." Daniel crossed his arms. "What is it?" Ryan took a deep breath. Then he said the words. "I'm disappearing." Daniel blinked. "What?" "I'm leaving for 3 months." Daniel stared at him. "Leaving where?" "I don't know yet." Ryan leaned forward. "But I need to find out if genuine people still exist." Daniel looked confused. Ryan continued. "For 3 months, nobody can know who I am." The lawyer's eyes widened. "Ryan, that's insane." "Maybe. But I'm doing it." Daniel stared at him. Then he realized Ryan wasn't joking. Not even a little. For the first time in years, Ryan Harrison was walking away from his billionaire life. And neither of them knew where that decision would lead. 3 days later, Ryan Harrison stood in front of a small mirror inside a rundown apartment on the south side of Chicago. The apartment was nothing like the places he was used to. The paint on the walls was peeling. The furniture was old. The kitchen was barely large enough for one person. But that was exactly what he wanted. For the first time in years, nobody knew who he was. No assistants. No bodyguards. No luxury cars. No private drivers. No reporters. Just Ryan. He looked down at the faded jeans he had purchased from a thrift store. The expensive suits were gone. The luxury watch was gone. Even his designer shoes had been replaced with worn sneakers. If someone saw him on the street, they would never guess. He was worth billions. Daniel was the only person who knew where he was. Everyone else believed Ryan was taking a private retreat overseas. Ryan grabbed his backpack and left the apartment. The morning air was cold. As he walked through the neighborhood, he noticed something strange. People barely looked at him. A month ago, whenever he entered a room, everyone smiled. Everyone wanted his attention. Now he seemed invisible. At first, Ryan found it peaceful. But over the next few days, that feeling began to change. One afternoon, he stopped at a coffee shop. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room. He stepped up to the counter. Before he could order, a customer behind him muttered something under his breath. Ryan ignored it. Then the cashier looked at him suspiciously. "Can I help you?" Ryan nodded. "Just a small coffee, please." The cashier glanced at his clothes. Then at his worn backpack. Her smile disappeared. Ryan noticed it immediately. He wasn't imagining things. She was judging him. A few minutes later, he received his coffee and sat near the window. As he drank, he watched people walking outside. Most looked stressed. Most looked busy. Most never noticed each other. For the first time in his life, Ryan was seeing the world from a completely different perspective. And he didn't like what he saw. A week later, things became worse. Ryan entered a convenience store to buy a bottle of water. As he walked through the aisles, he noticed the store manager watching him. Every move. Every step. When Ryan reached the counter, the manager finally spoke. "Make sure you pay for that." Ryan looked at him. For a moment he didn't understand. Then he realized the man thought he might steal. Ryan quietly placed the bottle on the counter and paid. The manager never apologized. Outside, Ryan stood on the sidewalk. He wasn't angry. He was hurt. For years, people had treated him with respect. Not because of who he was. Because of what he had. Now that appearance was gone, so was their respect. That realization stayed with him. Days passed. Then weeks. Every morning Ryan developed a routine. He would leave his apartment early. Walk several blocks. Then spend hours outside a public library. Reading. Thinking. Observing. The library became his favorite place. Books never judged people. Books didn't care how much money someone had. One rainy afternoon, Ryan sat beneath a small shelter outside the library entrance. Dark clouds filled the sky. Cold rain poured onto the sidewalk. People rushed past without stopping. Ryan pulled his jacket tighter around himself and continued reading. A few moments later, he heard a voice. "You're going to catch a cold sitting out here." Ryan looked up. A woman stood in front of him holding an umbrella. She appeared to be around his age. Warm brown eyes. Simple clothing. A kind smile. Ryan immediately recognized her. She worked inside the library. He had seen her several times. But they had never spoken. The woman held out a paper cup. "Here." Ryan looked confused. She smiled. "It's coffee." Ryan stared at the cup. Nobody had done something kind for him in weeks. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she pointed at the book in his hands. "You've been reading that all week." Ryan laughed softly. "I guess I'm a slow reader." She smiled. "I don't think that's true." Ryan noticed how easy it was to talk to her. There was no pretending. No pressure. No expectations. Just a simple conversation. "I'm Grace," she said. "Ryan." She sat on the bench beside him. Most people would have walked away. Grace stayed. The rain continued falling. Cars passed. People hurried by. Yet somehow the world felt quieter. "What brings you here every day?" Grace asked. Ryan considered the question. He couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. So he chose part of the truth. "I'm trying to figure some things out." Grace nodded. "Life." Ryan smiled. "Something like that." She laughed. "Good luck." Ryan laughed too. It felt strange. He couldn't remember the last time he had genuinely laughed. Their conversation lasted nearly 20 minutes. Before leaving, Grace stood up. "I should get back to work." Ryan nodded. "Thanks for the coffee." "You're welcome." She started walking away. Then suddenly stopped. "Oh no." She checked her bag. Her expression changed instantly. Ryan stood. "What happened?" "My envelope." "What envelope?" Grace looked worried. "A very important envelope." Ryan could see genuine panic in her eyes. "I had it this morning." She searched her bag again. "Nothing." Ryan frowned. "Maybe you left it somewhere." Grace shook her head. "No. Whatever was inside that envelope clearly mattered. A lot." For several moments she searched everywhere around the library entrance. Nothing. Finally she sighed. "I have to get back inside." Ryan nodded. "I hope you find it." Grace forced a small smile. "Me too." Then she disappeared through the library doors. Ryan remained outside. A few minutes later, he stood from the bench. As he adjusted his backpack, something caught his attention. An envelope. Partially hidden beneath the bench. Ryan bent down and picked it up. His eyes widened. It belonged to Grace. He immediately recognized her name written across the front. For a second, he considered running inside. Then he noticed the library had already closed its front desk for the evening. The doors were locked. Ryan looked down at the envelope. He had no idea what was inside. But judging from Grace's reaction, it was important. Very important. He slipped the envelope carefully into his backpack. Tomorrow morning, he would return it. As Ryan began walking home through the rain, he couldn't stop thinking about Grace. For weeks, people had treated him like he didn't matter. Yet she had offered him coffee. She had spoken to him with kindness. She had treated him like a human being. And for the first time since leaving his billionaire life behind, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Little did he know, returning that envelope the next day would be the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Ryan woke up earlier than usual. For a few moments, he stared at the ceiling of his small apartment. Then his eyes moved to the envelope resting on the table beside his bed. Grace. For some reason, he found himself smiling. He quickly got dressed, grabbed the envelope, and headed toward the library. The city was just beginning to wake up. Store owners were opening their businesses. People hurried toward work. Cars filled the streets. Yet Ryan's attention remained fixed on one thing. Returning the envelope. When he arrived, Grace was already outside unlocking the library entrance. The moment she saw him, she smiled. "Good morning." Ryan smiled back. "I think this belongs to you." He held up the envelope. Grace's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness." She rushed forward and took it from his hands. "You found it?" Ryan nodded. "It was under the bench." For a second, Grace simply stared at the envelope. Then relief flooded her face. You have no idea how important this is. Ryan noticed her hands trembling slightly. Everything okay? Grace hesitated. Then she looked down. It's medical paperwork. Ryan's expression changed. Medical paperwork? She nodded. My mother has been having health problems. Ryan immediately understood why she had been so worried. I'm sorry. Grace forced a small smile. We're managing. Ryan wasn't sure he believed her. But he didn't push. Instead, he simply said, I'm glad I found it. Grace looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled warmly. Can I buy you breakfast? Ryan laughed. You don't owe me breakfast. I know. She smiled. But I'd like to. A few minutes later, they sat together in a small diner across the street. The place wasn't fancy. The tables were old. The menu was simple. But Ryan found himself enjoying it more than many of the luxury restaurants he used to visit. For the first time in months, he wasn't discussing business deals. He wasn't attending meetings. He wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was simply having breakfast with a friend. As they talked, Ryan learned more about Grace. Her father had passed away several years earlier. Since then, she had been helping support her mother. Money was always tight. Some months were harder than others. Yet she never complained. Instead, she focused on helping others. Ryan found that remarkable. Most of the wealthy people he knew complained constantly despite having everything. Grace had very little. Yet she remained kind. When breakfast ended, Grace checked the time. I should get to work. Ryan nodded. Thanks for breakfast. Thank you for finding the envelope. As she walked back toward the library, Ryan couldn't stop watching her. There was something different about her. Something genuine. And that made her impossible to forget. Over the next several weeks, Ryan and Grace saw each other almost every day. At first, their conversations were simple. Books. Movies. Favorite childhood memories. The weather. But gradually, those conversations became deeper. One afternoon, they sat together in a nearby park. Children played in the distance. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. Grace looked toward the sky. Can I ask you something? Ryan nodded. Sure. What do you do for work? Ryan nearly laughed. He had been expecting that question eventually. He carefully chose his words. Right now, I'm between jobs. That wasn't exactly a lie. He wasn't working. Not at the moment. Grace nodded. No wonder you're always reading. Ryan smiled. What about you? She laughed. You already know what I do. Besides the library. Grace thought for a moment. Then she sighed. I take care of my mom. Ryan could hear the exhaustion in her voice. It must be difficult. Sometimes. She looked down. But she's all I have. Ryan understood that feeling more than she realized. For years, his company had consumed most of his life. Success had come at a cost. Many friendships had faded. Relationships had failed. His world had become smaller. And lonelier. Grace glanced at him. What about you? What about me? Do you have family? Ryan looked away. My parents passed away a few years ago. Grace's expression softened. I'm sorry. Ryan nodded. The conversation became quiet. Yet somehow the silence felt comfortable. Not awkward. Just peaceful. And Ryan realized he hadn't felt peaceful in a very long time. One evening, Grace invited Ryan to dinner. Not at a restaurant. At her home. Ryan almost refused. Then he remembered why he had started this journey in the first place. To experience life honestly. To connect with real people. So he accepted. The following evening, Ryan arrived at a small house on a quiet street. It wasn't large. It wasn't luxurious. But it felt warm. Grace opened the door. Hi. Ryan smiled. Hi. She led him inside. The smell of homemade food filled the house. A few moments later, he met Linda Walker. Grace's mother. Linda immediately welcomed him with a smile. So you're Ryan. Ryan laughed. And you're Linda. Grace talks about you a lot. Grace's face instantly turned red. Mom. Linda laughed. Ryan couldn't help smiling. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of a family dinner. The evening passed quickly. They shared stories. They laughed. They talked about books. Movies. Life. As Ryan prepared to leave, Linda pulled Grace aside. She thought Ryan couldn't hear. But he did. He's a good man. Grace smiled. I know. Ryan felt his heart beat a little faster. Over the next few weeks, something began changing between them. Neither spoke about it. Neither admitted it. But both felt it. Ryan looked forward to seeing Grace every day. And Grace found herself searching for him whenever he wasn't around. One rainy afternoon, they shared an umbrella while walking through the city. Neither seemed eager for the walk to end. Neither seemed eager to say goodbye. The feelings between them were growing. Slowly. Naturally. And for the first time since Victoria broke his heart, Ryan found himself believing in love again. But neither of them knew that trouble was already approaching. A misunderstanding. A false accusation. And a difficult test that would soon reveal just how much Grace truly cared about him. For the next several days, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's phone call. The board wanted him back. His company needed him. The life he had left behind was waiting. Yet every time he thought about returning, his mind went to Grace. He thought about their first conversation in the rain. The coffee she had offered him. The afternoons in the park. The dinners with her and Linda. The way she had stood beside him when everyone else doubted him. And most of all, he thought about the secret he was still keeping. Every day he told himself he would reveal the truth. Every day he found a reason to wait. Not because he wanted to deceive her. Because he was terrified. Terrified that the moment she learned who he really was, everything between them would disappear. One afternoon, Ryan sat across from Daniel inside a private office downtown. It was the first time he had entered one of his company's buildings in months. Daniel studied him carefully. You need to tell her. Ryan sighed. I know. No, Ryan, you really need to tell her. Ryan looked away. Daniel continued. If she finds out from someone else, it will be much worse. Ryan knew his friend was right. But knowing and doing were two different things. What if she walks away? Daniel leaned back in his chair. Then at least she'll be walking away from the truth. The words stayed with Ryan long after the meeting ended. A few days later, Grace received an envelope in the mail. She opened it while sitting at her kitchen table. Inside was a formal invitation. Her eyes widened. Mom. Linda looked up from her book. What is it? Grace handed her the invitation. Linda adjusted her glasses and read it. A charity gala. Grace nodded. I don't understand. Neither did she. The event was being held at one of the most luxurious hotels in Chicago. People like Grace didn't receive invitations to places like that. Then she noticed something written at the bottom. Special guest invitation. Grace frowned. Something about the invitation felt strange. But curiosity eventually won. She decided to attend. The night of the gala finally arrived. Grace stood in front of a mirror adjusting her dress. She looked nervous. Linda smiled. You look beautiful. Grace laughed softly. I still feel like I don't belong there. Linda walked over and squeezed her hand. Sometimes life surprises us. Grace smiled. A few minutes later, she left for the hotel. The moment she arrived, she knew this was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Photographers stood outside. Business leaders filled the lobby. Everything felt overwhelming. Grace stepped inside. The ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Elegant decorations filled the room. Hundreds of guests mingled together. She looked around, searching for a familiar face. Ryan wasn't there. At least, not that she could see. A few minutes later, the lights dimmed. The room gradually became silent. Then a voice echoed through the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Everyone turned toward the stage. Grace watched with curiosity. The announcer smiled. It is now my pleasure to introduce the founder and CEO of Harrison Technologies. Grace froze. Something about that name sounded familiar. The announcer continued. Please welcome Ryan Harrison. Suddenly, the giant screen behind the stage lit up. Photographs appeared. Magazine covers. Business awards. News headlines. And, standing in every image was the same man. Ryan. Grace felt her heart stop. Then he walked onto the stage. Not in worn jeans. Not in an old jacket. But in a perfectly tailored suit. The entire ballroom rose to its feet. Applause erupted. Grace couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The homeless man she had fallen in love with, the man she had defended, the man she thought had nothing, was actually one of the richest men in America. The event ended in a blur. Grace barely remembered leaving the ballroom. Her mind was overwhelmed. Confusion, shock, hurt, questions. So many questions. As she stepped outside, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Grace. She stopped. Slowly, she turned around. Ryan stood there. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. I can explain. Grace laughed bitterly. Can you? Ryan stepped closer. Please let me try. Tears filled her eyes. Who are you? The question struck him harder than anything else. Grace. No. She shook her head. Don't do that. Her voice trembled. Who are you really? Ryan lowered his head. I never wanted to hurt you. Grace stared at him. I trusted you. Every word felt like a knife. I know. You let me believe you were homeless. Ryan closed his eyes. I know. You lied to me every single day. Ryan struggled to find the right words. I was afraid. Grace looked at him in disbelief. Afraid of what? Afraid that if people knew who I was, they would only see my money. The tears finally escaped her eyes. I'm not people, Ryan. The words shattered him. Because she was right. She wasn't people. She was Grace. The one person who had never judged him. The one person who had cared about him before knowing the truth. Yet he had still hidden it from her. And now she was paying the price. Without another word, Grace walked away. Ryan didn't stop her. Because he knew she needed time. The following weeks were painful. They didn't call each other. They didn't meet. They didn't speak. Ryan buried himself in work. But nothing felt right. Success no longer mattered. The company no longer mattered. Not without Grace. Meanwhile, Grace struggled with her own emotions. She missed him. She missed their conversations. She missed their friendship. But she couldn't forget the lie. One afternoon, Linda sat beside her on the porch. You still love him. Grace sighed. It's not that simple. Linda nodded. No, it isn't. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Linda asked quietly. When Ryan was sitting outside that library, before you knew he was rich, was he a good man? Grace immediately answered. Yes. When he helped you with your mother, was he a good man? Yes. When he stood beside you, laughed with you, and cared for you, was he a good man? Grace looked down. Yes. Linda smiled softly. Then maybe the man you loved never changed. Those words stayed with Grace. For days. A week later, Grace received a message. Just one sentence. Can we meet at the park? Ryan. After a long hesitation, she agreed. The following afternoon, she arrived at the same park where they had spent countless hours together. Ryan was already there. Sitting on the same bench. The bench where their friendship had truly begun. When he saw her, he stood. Neither spoke at first. Then Ryan finally broke the silence. I'm sorry. Grace listened. I should have told you the truth. He took a deep breath. I was so focused on finding someone who would love me for who I was that I forgot trust works both ways. Grace felt tears forming again. Ryan continued. You trusted me. His voice cracked. And I didn't trust you enough. For the first time, she saw how much pain he was carrying. Not the pain of a billionaire. The pain of a man who had been hurt. The pain of someone terrified of losing the one person who mattered. Slowly, Grace stepped closer. You really hurt me. Ryan nodded. I know. But I know why you did it. Ryan looked up. Hope appeared in his eyes. And a small smile touched Grace's lips. And I'm willing to try again. Ryan stared at her, almost unable to believe what he had heard. Then he smiled. The first genuine smile he had worn in weeks. 1 year later, family and friends gathered in a beautiful garden overlooking the Chicago skyline. Ryan and Grace stood together beneath the afternoon sun, hand in hand, surrounded by love. After the ceremony ended, they walked together through a nearby park. Eventually, they reached an old familiar bench. Ryan smiled. You remember this place? Grace laughed. Of course. Ryan turned toward her. If I were still that homeless man sitting on this bench, would you still love me? Grace smiled. Then she took his hand. I never fell in love with your money. Ryan's eyes softened. Grace squeezed his hand. I fell in love with your heart. Ryan pulled her into an embrace as the sun slowly disappeared behind the Chicago skyline. And for the first time in a very long time, both of them knew they had found exactly what they had been searching for. Not wealth. Not status. Not success. But something far more valuable. True love. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this.